Today, Wisconsin legislators gathered at the state capitol to mark the 50th anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision. The landmark legislation that affirmed the constitutional right to abortion was overturned by the Supreme Court back in June. State officials were joined by reproductive health leaders to provide updates on the state of the current reproductive rights in Wisconsin. This follows yesterday women's march to the Wisconsin Capitol, where advocates voiced their support for pro-choice. Those in attendance at today's event stressing current legislation is willfully choosing to jeopardize the health of people in the state.
Every day that passes, every day that legislative Republicans choose to deny access to safe and legal abortion in the state of Wisconsin is another day that they're willfully choosing to jeopardize the lives of people in the state of Wisconsin.
Health officials citing last week's new study from the Gender Equity Policy Institute. Their data show mothers in states with abortion bans are 3 times more likely to die, and infants born in states with those bans face that same statistic.